I'm Kyle Malnati, your host of the Calibrate Real Estate Podcast. At Calibrate, we exist to help people create generational wealth through real estate. My personal mission is to encourage, empower, and educate you by sharing best practices from business leaders that are proven winners. Broadcasting from the Mile High City, thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Calibrate Real Estate Podcast. I'm your host, Kyle Malnati, and oh my goodness, over 2 years in the making. This episode has been one of those acts of perseverance. I've been striving for this one. I'm so pleased to introduce our expert guest today, Jon Acuff. Jon Acuff is the best-selling author of 7 books, including Start, Do Over, and Finish. Do Over was a New York Times bestseller, and Finish was a Wall Street Journal #1 bestseller. Jon is an Inc. magazine top 100 leadership speaker and speaks all over the world to companies. I don't know if you've ever heard of these guys: Microsoft, Nissan, Walmart, FedEx, and Comedy Central, just to name drop a few. Jon has spent the last 20 years helping brands, teams, and individuals build the kind of companies and the lives they really want. Jon lives outside of Nashville, Tennessee, with his wife, Jenny, and their 2 daughters, Ellie and McRae. Welcome to the show, Jon Acuff. All right, Jon, welcome to the show. Soundtracks are a major part of entertainment. Music playing in the background of our favorite movies, shows, plays, video games. But soundtracks can be sneaky because they tell us the feelings we're supposed to have about something. And I'm sure you've seen this a bunch of times where someone removes the soundtrack and plays the vignette or the scene, and it just doesn't have the same effect. So soundtracks really give that bass drum effect to something. So how does the music that we hear play a role in our adolescent development?
Yeah, well, that was an interesting study that the New York Times did, that the songs you hear at certain ages, it's like 14 to 17 for men, 11 to 14 for women, have a stronger impact on you than any other song you hear the rest of your life. So songs you hear in your 20s don't have the same impact. And I talk about that a little in my new book, because it's such an interesting parallel to the thoughts, the consistent thoughts you have that I call soundtracks that shape your day. It can be, you have a soundtrack for every person in your life, every project in your life, every relationship in your life, every challenge in your life. And most of the time, like you said, we don't even notice them. They're in the background, but they are shaping the moment. And that's why they're so powerful when you decide, wait a second, I notice them and I'm actually going to choose different ones.
I love that answer. And as far as the new book soundtracks, I read it cover to cover. I listened to the audiobook 3 times, and a quick kudos to you. In one of your emails, I love getting your emails. One of your emails, you share one of the faster ways to read is to actually buy the audiobook and read the physical book. Yeah. And you read basically a little bit faster in your mind. So just turn up that audiobook to about 1.5 or 1.25
yeah,
speed.
And you're processing it in 2 different ways. So you're processing it with, your eyes and your ears. And a friend of mine taught me that, and I love, that's my favorite way to read.
I cranked through the book because of it. And it was, so thank you. You're going to end up saving this podcast host a lot of time.
Oh, awesome.
So you tackle the subject of overthinking. And I know Mike Peasley, PhD, the PhD that you hired for the book, you guys went through this process of surveying a lot of different people, and over 99% said that they struggled with overthinking. You actually tell your readers in the book that your brain can be a real jerk, because our brain has this ability to dwell on patterns of persistent, repetitive thought, basically overthinking. Further, the brain builds overthinking's habit of negativity, doing 3 different things. 1, lying about our memories. 2, confusing fake trauma with real trauma. And 3, believing what it already believes. Jon, these are some pretty serious accusations. How did you solve the problem of overthinking for yourself?
Well, I mean, it's like anything else. It takes time. For me, the first time I bumped into, wait a second, my thoughts can work for me, not against me, it was in 2008. And I felt stuck at a job. My career had plateaued in my early 30s, which is intimidating because you think a plateau is going to come in your 50s. And I was stuck, and I started to write a blog, because it's like you hosting a podcast. It's amazing how you can reach people just as an individual, like that we have that access. So I started blogging, and out of nowhere, somebody said, "Hey, will you come speak at our event?" And I had never done that. I had no proof that that would work. I had no evidence. I didn't even know you got paid for that kind of thing. And I just had one tiny thought that said, I think I can do this. And that thought was enough to get everything in motion. And so I started to deliberately overthink that thought. I think I can be a public speaker. I think I can be an author. Again, didn't have a book, didn't have a public speaking platform, but I thought, I think I can do this. And that thought, I always tell people, your thoughts turn into your actions, which turn into your results. So I really started to say, okay, I believe I can do this. So I'm going to follow that up with action, and then I'm going to see what results I get. And that became a pattern that I worked on for 13 years. So that was a big part of, for me, is understanding overthinking. And then the three things I teach in the book, there's three things that I teach you to do. One, retire broken soundtracks. Number two is replace them with new ones. And three, repeat the new ones so often they become as automatic as the old ones. And that's what it all comes down to. You retire, you replace, you repeat. And if you can do that, you can really change the way you think.
John, I went through the book and I highlighted like crazy. And that's a skill that I learned from author Hal Elrod. He said it's one of the best compliments to an author is if you just go through it and just highlight like crazy through the book. It means I can't give them to anybody. So I'm going to have this big library of books.
I mean, you can still sell it in a used bookstore, because I'll occasionally see my books that I've autographed for sale in a used bookstore, which means somebody was like, meh, and I'll go in and be like, too soon, Brenda, too soon. Because it'll be like, dear Brenda, thanks for reading my book. I'm like, oh, the dagger. That always cracks me up. We do it at McKay's all the time, this big bookstore here.
I love it. And I highlighted a bunch of these negative soundtracks, and so many of them spoke to me. And I know that they're obviously soundtracks you've heard, they're soundtracks other people have shared with you that they think of. And I'll go through just a couple of them to really set the scene for our audience. And our audience is a lot of realtors, a lot of people that are hustling, and people that are out there constantly striving to do better.
Love realtors. Realtors are some of my favorite groups to speak to, because y'all are already in motion. Sometimes I have to convince somebody to hustle. Like realtors, when you speak to a room full of realtors, they're like, I dare you to keep up with us. Like, especially right now, like that you even have time to do this podcast is amazing to me. Thanks for doing it.
Well, we carved it out, and it's been 2 years in the making, so I wouldn't have missed it.
Oh, thanks, man.
So some of these soundtracks are, and I've said these to myself at different times, or as I'm launching something new, even though I've had other successes. What if someone finds out that I don't really know what I'm doing? Where's this even going? What's the point if I don't have a perfect plan to grow it? I mean, think about growing my own business. And that was something that absolutely constantly got repeated to me internally and externally. I'm the most disorganized, dreams are dangerous. Don't get your hopes up too high. I got 20 of them, but all these different soundtracks, I really feel like are natural. They play. It's not like we have to remind ourselves of these things. They're just playing on repeat. And you encourage the audience and also your readers in your book to borrow soundtracks. And this is something that I really resonated with. And I think it's important to share with our audience today that number one of the borrowed soundtracks you use is people are trying to give you money. Number two, I'll feel awesome after. Number three, spare change adds up. Number four, pick ROI, not ego or EGO. Number five, pivot, don't panic. And I know you're a Friends fan, the TV show, so I feel like that's a little bit of an homage to Ross Geller.
Ross shout out. Yeah.
So those five, how did you develop those? I would imagine that a lot of that comes from your own internal working through broken soundtracks and then borrowing these soundtracks.
Yeah. So the borrow, like sometimes when you'll tell somebody, I'll go, do you overthink? And everybody says, yes, I overthink. And I go, what do you overthink? And they'll mention some specific things. And then I'll say, well, what would you like to think about instead? Like if you could have a new soundtrack, what would it be? And that can be kind of an overwhelming question, because most people haven't thought, wait a second, I have the permission to think what I want to think. I get to choose that can propel me forward. So I always tell people a really easy way to kind of dip your toe into it is to borrow someone else's. So to pay attention and say, okay, wow, that song lyric really motivated me, or wow, that question that friend said really motivated me, or wow, that idea. I was on a podcast yesterday and was interviewing somebody, and I asked them, okay, what are some things that some soundtracks that inspire you? And they mentioned something from a show about Mark Wahlberg and his family. They're all incredibly accomplished. They're all very deliberate. They're goal setters. And a brother had said, I can't take this long basketball shot because I don't have range. And Mark Wahlberg had said, how do you know until you try? And that really, like, a real, a single sentence on a TV show about Marky Mark. Like that was something that this woman said, wow, that's a great point. How will I know unless I try? Like, why will I say no? Like, why don't I just actually try? So that's what I mean by borrow. Like it turns your ears and your eyes on to that. You're surrounded by wisdom. You're surrounded by soundtracks. You're surrounded by things that might help you. And if you'll pay attention, it might be the first step to going, okay, I'm going to choose to believe that. Like that's now going to become something that I think about. So that's how borrowing works. And then for me, I spent 2 years deliberately going, okay, what are the soundtracks that help me the most? My first podcast failed because of ego. I had 8 episodes and I kind of showed up and was like, oh, I'm Jon Acuff. I'm a New York Times bestseller. Podcasting is easy. And I just winged it and it was terrible. It was a train wreck. So now my new podcast is so much better because I've put so much more effort into it. So I've said, okay, I'm going to pick ROI, not ego. I'm not going to do the ego thing. I'm going to do the thing, what's best. What's best is me to have great guests. What's best is me to write, really good questions. What's best is me to put a lot of work into it versus going, I'm going to make an ego decision. So a lot of those came from my own life of going, okay, what's going on right now? The people are trying to give me money. That one I have hanging up right here. Like that one's right in front of me. If you're listening, I'm just holding up a note card that says people are trying to give you money. That one came from going into business negotiations and going and being too stressed and going, wait a second. It's kind of like, whenever I have a bad experience with a waiter, I always think this is so weird because I'm just trying to give you money. Like whenever you go to a restaurant and somebody acts put out that you're there, you kind of want to go like, I'm only here because I thought it was a restaurant. Like I thought like the whole, like, I just want to give you a great tip. That's why I'm here. I'm just trying to give you money. And so to not have an attitude that's closed off, to not have an attitude that's, frustrated. And so that one helped me in business situations. So I'm always looking and going, how do I improve this situation? How do I do better on this product? How do I make sure I run? I'll feel awesome afterwards from running. I didn't want to run in January because it's freezing and it sucks. And I don't want to run in July. July is hot. We live in the South. It's brutal. But I realized I'll feel awesome after. I always feel awesome after. I walk away and go, wow, I did it. Like I ran today I met my buddy Ruben at 5:45 a.m. Like I didn't want to do it necessarily. Like it's early, but I felt so great after. So I use that one to remind myself, focus on the after, not the before. If you focus on the before, you'll never do the thing. You'll never start your podcast. You'll never run the race. But if you'll focus on the after, I say think about the before in black and white and the after in hypercolor, like in technicolor, there's going to be so many great things that happen. So all those processes for me, create all these new soundtracks that I test out, that I share with people, that I have on note cards around my office. And it's really encouraging.
I love all that advice. And I think, and we were talking about this a bit as we were preparing for the show, that someone that's accomplished so much like yourself, Jon, there's a lot of people out there that want to write one book and really struggle to do it. You've written 7. Several of your books have been bestsellers. You're a best-selling author. You're, an Inc. 100 speaker. I mean, it's a pretty big deal. And at the same time, you just shared that you had a podcast that didn't work out. And now you're launching. And one of the things I was asking you as we were preparing, you've launched this new podcast, All It Takes Is a Goal, which I've really enjoyed listening to. And I think it's very interesting for someone that's accomplished so much. Sometimes it can be almost more difficult to start something new because you've done so many things that have worked out. And so what does it take for those high achievers to really still have that curious mind, to have that ability to say, okay, I haven't really done this thing before, but that's okay if I kind of stumble and fail. It doesn't mean that everything else I've done is now a failure. I feel like that's something that whether you think of it like a sophomore slump or whatever people might say is really something that hamstrings a lot of high achievers.
Yeah, I think you can't compare the new thing to the old thing. So say you're a realtor and you're amazing and you're awesome at that. And you want to start a podcast about real estate. That'd be fantastic. But if you go in and say, okay, I'm an amazing realtor, I should be as amazing at podcasting instantly. Wow, that's so unfair because it took you years to become amazing at the other thing, and you have to give yourself time. And so for me, it's about going, I should be an amateur right now. That's what's happening. Like I see that with people that go, okay, John, I want to lose, weight, but this exercise program isn't working for me. And I'll say, well, how long have you done it? And I'll say 10 days. And I'll say, well, how long did it take you to gain the weight? I'll say 10 years. And I'll say, you gave the problem 10 years to develop and the solution 10 days to develop. That's really unkind to the solution. So it's the same with me, where I have a handful of things that I spent a long time working on that I feel proficient in. I'm not there on my podcast. Like, it's getting better and I'm learning and I'm growing, but I have to be willing to go back to being a complete amateur, and allow myself to make some mistakes. And one of the things that I like, you talk about a soundtrack of borrowing from the best. Greg McKeown just came out with a book called Effortless. And probably one of my favorite stories in Effortless is he has a friend who's a language teacher. And he said, people are afraid to practice speaking because they don't want to say the wrong word. Like, if you learn Italian, you don't want to, like, I don't want to use the wrong conjugation. I don't want to say the wrong word. And he teaches his students to think about having a basket of 100 marbles. And every time you make a mistake, you take a marble out. And your goal is to get to an empty basket. And once you've emptied 1,000 marbles, you've reached level 1 of language mastery. So he says, your goal is to get rid of those marbles as fast as you can. And if you look at it that way, I want to make as many mistakes as fast as I can and learn from them and grow from them and change them, versus, okay, I got to do this perfectly. Like, that changes your perspective. So like, that's one of those examples of, I read that and I was like, that's a soundtrack. Like, empty the marbles, like empty the marbles. Like, oh, I just made this mistake. Like, empty the marbles. Like, you've been in real estate. Like, there's things you know how to do now because 3 years ago you made a mistake and said, oh, when I do that, the client does this. Like, okay, I need to tweak that. I'm not going to do that again. And you continue to grow. And so that's my approach to the podcast. And it's been a blast, and I'm going to continue to grow it. And then just also, we like to tell stories of how easy things are. Sometimes you go, dude, just a podcast isn't easy. They're so great. Just start a podcast. Like, everybody has a podcast. Terrible average stuff is easy. Like, it always is. Average is easy. Excellent is challenging, regardless of what it is. So you have to give yourself the freedom to go, it's going to be challenging. And that's not failure. That's how it should be. When somebody says you can write a book in, a month, I always think, yeah, like a bad one. You can definitely write a bad book in a month. But a good book takes longer than that. That's just how life is. That's not failure. So that's kind of how I think about the podcast.
Oh, there's so much great comments and thoughts in there. This is episode 175 of our podcast.
Congrats, dude. That's huge.
Thank you. And when I met you in 2015, it was leading into an event that I was going to be going to later that year in Nashville.
Sopapias, right?
Well, Sopapias, we met actually a couple of years ago, or re-met, but actually I met you in the book line for your do-over book at Eastern Hills Community Church at the Queso Rama.
Oh yeah.
And
when in Colorado?
Yeah, in Colorado. That's right.
That's crazy.
Yeah. So
with Josh was the pastor.
That's right. Yeah. And one of the things that I had asked you about is I was going to be going to this event that was a big ticket item through the Dave Ramsey organization. And I had an opportunity at that event to actually sit down and have a one-on-one with Christy Wright. And Christy, as I was talking about podcasting and doing different things, she encouraged me through some experience. She said, look, podcasting, once a month or every couple of weeks, that's good. But we didn't really see a big uptick on the Entre Leadership podcast until we did it once a week. And that was a challenge to me to go like, yeah, I mean, professionals, Seth Godin says this, they ship their product. They make it happen consistently. And so there's so many different things in that excellent realtors, they come to work every single day. They wear, a nice button down, they wear a nice blouse, not yoga pants. I mean, they're serious about their profession.
Well, and they don't go, I'm into real estate because I love houses. Like when somebody goes, there's so many people that I'm sure the burnout within the first 6 months because they thought, I love house shows. Like, and and the market is blowing up. Like, I'll just go become a real estate agent, and like, it's not going to last. Yeah.
So I brought some visual aids. I've got 2 half-dollar coins.
Hey, look at that, dude.
And I've got to ask you, because you ask your readers to ask, did you really buy an entire case of half-dollar quarters?
There's a huge box in the closet. Yeah. So the story is I used coins to help me break my addiction to texting and driving. I got a $300 ticket in Canada, and I was about to teach my oldest daughter how to drive, and I felt like a huge hypocrite. And I tried everything, turn it off, throw it in the back seat, like nothing worked. So I said, I need to tie it to like an actual item. And so I went to the bank and I got initially $200 in $1 coins. And every time I drove, I would give a coin into a mason jar. And my wife teased me because she was like, it's your own money. You're not making new money. Like, you took paper money, turn it into metal money, and then you're going to re-roll it and turn it back into paper money. And I was like, I don't care if it works.
Like, but pay myself first.
Exactly. Yeah. Profit first. And so like I did that, and then it worked so well. I said, I'm going to go get some, and the dollar coins aren't cool. Like, that's the thing.
The little, brass.
They're little brass, like $50. They're bigger than a quarter. It's got JFK on it. Like, they feel like something. And so I decided I'm going to go get some more. And there was a mix up at the bank when I said 500 coins, they thought I meant $500. So when I got there, there was a box of 1,000 coins that weighed like more than 20 pounds. And so, yeah, I 100% have those. When I start traveling again, I said in the book, if somebody finds me, I mean, if you see, we live near each other. If you see me at Frothy Monkey, like you should 100% be like, you got a coin on you? And I'll be like, yeah, here you go. Cause I'm going to carry them when I travel. Cause like, it's such a simple symbol to remind me of goals that I'm working on. And there's a chapter in the book about how do you tie a soundtrack to a symbol. And it's a really powerfully simple way to do it.
Well, and the cool thing too, is you mentioned that your buddy had shared with you that turning down or turning up the volume is like a dial. And you look at this $50 coin and it looks like more like a dial, because a lot of people feel like it's like an on and off button, right?
Yeah,
I'm just going to turn off. Yeah. Or switch. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So a lot of people look at negative thinking as a switch, or stress as a switch. And my buddy, David Thomas, who's here in Nashville too, said, it's not a switch, it's a dial. Because when you think about it like a switch, you go, I'm going to go do yoga, and maybe yoga works for a week and you're like, all my stress is gone, but it's coming back. And then you feel, oh, I failed. It was the wrong switch. I got to get another switch. And then you jump and you jump and you jump and you jump. Versus a dial approach is you go, life's going to turn up the dial. There's going to be days when it's in 11, and I'm going to use my turn down techniques to turn it down. And you get to decide what those are. And that's where I think life gets really fun, because then you don't feel like a failure when you feel stressed. If you believe the switch mentality, you get into this loop of perfectionism, and you just keep, there's a reason people jump to 10 different diets. They go, okay, this is the one, it's going to be forever. And then they jump versus going, okay, the dial's up. How do I turn it down? And that approach will change your life.
Well, yeah, when you think about turning the dial just down a notch, it makes it so much more approachable. And I think of when you were writing and you were promoting your book, Finish, you talk about a lot of people, and you shared this earlier about someone who becomes overweight, and they don't do that in one day. It takes 10 years. And you shared that someone wants to start a workout regimen, and they're like, I'm going to run 3 miles today, or I'm going to run 2 miles. And they know exactly how much time it takes. And they're like, I don't have that much time. So they run 0 miles instead of running a half mile or running 1 mile. And it's just such a great reminder that we don't have to do it all in one day. We don't have to do it all in 1 week. You even shared that one of the soundtracks that you had is that, every time I write, I'm going to finish the book, or like I'm completing the book instead of 3 pages is enough.
Yeah, 3 pages is plenty. And if you'll talk to an honest author, they'll tell you they write like 90 minutes, maybe 3 hours a day, tops. Like, the perception is you're writing 12 hours a day and you're burning the midnight oil, whatever, but that's not the reality. Like, your words suck after like 4 hours, like 5 hours. And so, yeah, for me, I had this pressure. I was like, I got to finish the whole book today. And eventually I came down to like, no, 3 pages is plenty. Like, if I'm able to consistently do that day by day, then I'll be able to actually get this done. And that really released me from feeling like a failure. Cause it'd be like you, if like, I want to close my entire month in the first weekend, like you go, no, it's going to take you the whole month to get the numbers for, like, why would you even hold yourself to that? Like, no, focus on the next house and the next house and the next house. And so it gives you a lot more freedom and kind of pushes back against that soundtrack.
John, I can see you writing for 6 hours. You got the leather patches on your jacket, the pipe in your mouth.
Like a pipe. Yeah. No way, dude. I thought that initially in my life, because I kind of bought the lie of writing, but that's not the reality.
John, you wrote a hilarious blog and it turned into a book called Stuff Christians Like. And I'm going to ask you a couple of personal questions. Your dad is a pastor. Yep. Our mutual buddy, Rory Vaden, told me that you attend the same church. So we're going to talk about Christianity for just a moment. How do you use prayer to replace some of your broken soundtracks?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think if you look biblically, there's so many examples about why thinking matters. We're told to take every thought captive. We're told to not conform to the world. How? By the renewing of your mind. We're told to whatever is noble and admirable and beautiful to think on this. So I think the first thing you do is recognize that, okay, the Bible is full of wisdom about my thoughts matter and how I think matters. So I think that's the first part. The second part is, for me, I just look at, I have soundtracks around my faith. So one would be, I will never out hustle God. Like, so it's not on me. Like, it's not on me to go, okay, I got to put this all together. Right? Like, or like another one is like, the best gifts I've ever had were received, not forced. Like, working for Dave Ramsey was one of the greatest things that happened in my career. And I didn't force that. I really didn't. I shared a blog. I wrote a blog, Stuff Christians Like, which you mentioned, and somebody there saw it and thought, oh, we should have this guy come speak at our weekly devotionals. And I got to go do that over a period of 3 years. And then I got to work there. It wasn't that I strategically sat down and said, okay, how do I, that wasn't even in the cards. I didn't even know that could be a thing. And so I received that. I didn't force that. So that's how, for me, my prayer life ties into that, is like, you could call that a soundtrack, you could call that a prayer, but that's one of those things that I remember, oh, that's right. Like, I'm not going to out hustle God. Or like another one I say is, another prayer is, God won't be unleashed by my successes or handcuffed by my failures. Like, there's not going to be something that I failed to do that he goes, oh no, I wanted to do that in Franklin, but you didn't do it right, and I'm handcuffed. Like, he's God. Like, he's inviting me into his story, not like I have to figure it all out. So that's kind of how it ties in for me.
Yeah, it's great. You mentioned Dave Ramsey, and one of the things I've heard him say a multitude of times on different stages is that I figured out when he became successful that even though I can help people with their money on the Dave Ramsey show or in the Total Money Makeover, any book he might write, that I am not someone's savior. Jesus is. That's their personal Lord and Savior. And as soon as I freed myself of that, and he said that Sharon really helped him with that, as soon as I stopped trying to be people's saviors, he's like, it all worked out. I'm not God.
Totally.
So, John, the final question I ask all of my guests is this concept of Dear Younger Me. And it's the advice you wish you knew when you were 22. It comes from a song by Mercy Me, and kind of a juxtaposition of my two favorite soundtracks, Dear Younger Me and the song 22 by Taylor Swift. So if you could go back in time, give yourself some advice, John, what advice would you give yourself?
Find a mentor, talk less, listen more. That's be my advice. 100%.
I love it, John. Thank you for joining us on the Calibrate Real Estate Podcast. As I love to say, we will see you around the neighborhood. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Kyle.
Thank you, everybody, for listening in to that amazing episode with Jon Acuff. One of the things that I have gotten to understand, and this makes a lot of sense, if you work with anybody that has had success and major success like Jon Acuff has, you're on the clock. I mean, they're not going to sit there and talk for hours and hours on end. And so a lot of these major authors that we've had on our show, they give us a pretty tight window. And so any of the production that we might do to talk about their book and other things has to be done afterwards. And so here's a bonus. Obviously, Jon Acuff's book, Soundtracks, make sure to go get that. We got ours on Amazon. As most of the free world knows, you can get books on Amazon, but also go check out Jon Acuff's website. It's acuff.me. That's Acuff, ACUFF.me. And there's all sorts of awesome resources. One of the resources is the new anthem that Jon talks about in chapter 8. In chapter 8, that's titled Put the New Anthem on Repeat. We were talking about soundtracks and how to eliminate or replace these broken soundtracks with new, better soundtracks. And so what I think is important is I'm going to share with you the soundtrack that Jon has in the book. And this is a free resource. We're going to put this in the show notes. It's something that's on Jon's website as a downloadable PDF. So the new anthem, and this is an idea, whether you think about it as an affirmation, which a lot of realtors do to make sure that they're successful. Jon created this new anthem. So for 30 days, every morning and every night, find a mirror, stand up straight, and confidently say the following out loud. I, and then put your name in there. So I, Kyle Malnati, choose my thoughts. I know that doing my best starts with thinking my best. Like laying a path for an adventure, these thoughts will set the course for my actions. I'm confident that what I think matters. I'm excited to see what happens next. I'm disciplined and dedicated to stick with it. Here are 10 things I know. And here are those 10 new soundtracks. Number 1, today is brand new and tomorrow is too. Number 2, I've got a gift worth giving. Number 3, the only person standing in my way is me, and I quit doing that yesterday. Number 4, I am the CEO of me, and I am the best boss. Number 5, winning is contagious. When I help others win, I win too. Number 6, feeling uncomfortable is just a sign that my old comfort zone is having a hard time keeping up with me. Number 7, momentum is messy. Number 8, everything is always working out for me. Number 9, I am my biggest fan. Number 10, the best response to obstacles is to do it anyway. And then in the morning, you add this to the end of those 10. I've pulled the slingshot back. I'm not leaving this room. I'm launching from it. Ready for a day of untold opportunities. I've packed honesty, generosity, laughter, and bravery for the road ahead. Watch out, world. It's time to step up, step out, and step in. Then in the evening, you finish with saying, instead of what we just said for the morning, what a day. The best part is I left myself a lot of fun things to work on tomorrow. When my head hits the pillow, I'm off the clock, storing up energy and excitement for a brand new day. That's the new anthem in Jon Acuff's book, Soundtracks. I've actually been writing on the back here all of the different days where I've done it in the morning and or in the evening. And I'll admit very honestly with you that I don't always get the evening. I'm usually dog tired by the end of the day, and the evening is kind of the harder thing for me to do, but I get every morning and I just put it in my bathroom that I get ready in every morning and read that to myself. And John talks about that throughout the book, that it feels a little bit strange to read into a mirror, but it's working for me. I know for Ann Russell, our podcast producer, it's working for her. We've both bought the book on pre-release. And as you know, when we have great authors on the show, we want their book to get out there. So go on to Amazon and order Soundtracks. If you want, we'll have a limited amount of these. We'll buy you the book and we'll send it to you along with another book from an author that we've interviewed on this show. All you have to do is send an email to info, I-N-F-O, at calibrate.re.com. We're not going to share your email address or information. We're just literally going to mail you a copy of that book. You just have to drop your mailing address in there and we'll send you a book, Soundtracks, as well as one of the other books that we have from a great author. I'd love to say to all of you that have been listening in, whether it's a few episodes recently or if you've been listening to over 170, thank you for riding with us. It's important to share that 5-star reviews are really a big part of how this show grows. So if you could drop a 5-star review in Apple Podcasts, that's going to mean the world to Ann and I. And also, if you feel so bold as to write a comment, we love that as well. We're looking for 5-star reviews. So if you've got an issue with us, you can go ahead and send it to info@calibrate.re.com. If you have other offers that you'd like us to go after and go get on the show, we would love those suggestions. And if you have any questions for a guest that you'd like, go ahead and email that to us, info@calibrate.re.com. Of course, Calibrate Real Estate or Kyle Malnati on all social media. Thanks so much for listening to this bonus portion of the Calibrate Real Estate Podcast as we recap our show with Jon Acuff, super author, super speaker, and just super swell guy. Thanks so much for tuning in. As I love to say, for Ann Russell, our podcast producer, for Jon Acuff, our expert guest, thanks for tuning into the Calibrate Real Estate Podcast, and we will see you around the neighborhood. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.